Expanded upon. Thank you, sir.
I call the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, it has been said that those who do not learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. And the lessons of history, in the case of financial market regulation, are all too obvious. The doyens of the free market brought to us the circumstances that led to the great crash of 1929 and 30, and brought to us again the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. And the signs, in hindsight, were there for all to see. In the United States, a family pet could get a mortgage for a home. Mortgages could typically be up to 120% of the value of that home. That is, you could take out a mortgage for more than the value of your home and get 20% cash as well. And that toxic real estate debt that was founded on the fallacy that markets always move in an upward direction was magnified by blending with collateralised debt obligations and then expanded by multiples of hundreds through the use of derivatives that were insufficiently or inadequately regulated in that jurisdiction. That malaise, that contagion spread across the globe, caused the near freezing of financial markets, the failure of some of the United States' largest investment banks, Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, the one that John Key used to work for, Merrill Lynch. And Mr. Speaker, the European markets followed very soon after, and New Zealand, Iceland, Ireland and many other countries were not immune. We escaped a Great Depression of the 1930s by the merest whisker. And the ideas, sir, that led to that were there for all to see for some time, based upon, amongst others, the writings of Milton Friedman and its adoption in Ronald Reagan's America and Margaret Thatcher's Britain, and Roger Douglas and Ruth Richardson's versions of liberalisation in New Zealand. Mr. Speaker, the fallacy that unregulated financial markets lead to the best of all possible worlds has now been exploded. Mr. Speaker, this bill has bipartisan support. It is an attempt, perhaps not a far-reaching enough one, but an attempt nonetheless, to re-regulate those financial markets where there was inadequate regulation that contributed to that great recession. Mr. Speaker, the work was started under the Honourable Leanne Dalzell in the latter years of the previous Labor-led government, and it has been, I think, continued by the current government, and it has the bipartisan support of members of this House. Mr. Speaker, it has so because it attempts to re-regulate derivatives, to provide increased transparency for financial markets, to regulate financial products according to their economic substance, not just their name tags, and to model itself on the more thoroughgoing processes of our Australian regulators, the Australian Securities and Investment Corporation and the Australian Competition Watchdog. Mr. Speaker, it seeks to protect retail investors. It will have duties on issuers for ongoing disclosure. It will set common governance requirements that will apply to all managed investment schemes, and importantly, sir, it will introduce new criminal penalties in relation to serious breaches by directors to act in good faith. Mr. Speaker, these are not simply academic matters. Mr. Speaker, thousands of, in particular, senior New Zealanders have lost their life savings and sometimes their homes because of fly-by-night charlatans that are now household names and their phony investment companies that have taken money off decent New Zealanders and sold them down the river. The directors and the officers of those companies have had the global jet-set lifestyle while ordinary New Zealanders have suffered, seeing their life savings taken off them and frittered away based on business models that could never have worked, on the one-way model that markets will always appreciate, and that therefore the debt will always be covered by securities that are worth more and more, and nobody in their right mind, not even members opposite, believe markets always act like that. That behaviour in future will quite likely fall subject to the criminal penalties that are now incorporated in this bill and which have been strengthened by the Select Committee. Mr. Speaker, much of this work comes from the Capital Markets Development Task Force set up in 2008 by the previous Labour-led government. It developed a blueprint and an action plan for the development of New Zealand's financial system to enhance the integrity of those markets, to enhance the competitiveness of those markets, to provide more confidence for New Zealanders, and they're there to seek the win-win of a capitalist system that is adequately regulated in the public interest. We on the Labour Party don't believe markets are always bad, but we believe that laissez-faire capitalism is doomed to fail, to eat its own young, to cripple its own markets, and to take down the interests of ordinary New Zealanders in the process. And the evidence? 61 New Zealand finance companies have failed in the last 4 years, the latest of which was, well, not quite the latest now, South Canterbury Finance, that failed to the tune of $1.6 billion. And Mr. Speaker, when the full story is public about what happened at SCF and ministerial involvement involving Bill English, Stephen Joyce and others, John Key included, that turned away a recapitalisation deal that would have limited the taxpayer to a loss of $500 million in exchange for a catastrophe that cost $1,200 million. That's a $700 million stuff-up by those ministers, and when the full story is known, heads will roll. It may have been convenient for the Christ College mafia, but it was not convenient for the New Zealand taxpayer. And Mr. Speaker, the government is on notice that the next Labour-led government will thoroughly open the books on that disgusting case of South Canterbury Finance. And it is just one, albeit the largest one, of 61 finance company failures that have sadly taken the life savings of too many New Zealanders. Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge the bipartisan work of the Commerce Select Committee, led by Jonathan Young and on our side by the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove, which has in a number of respects strengthened the draft bill which is now before the House. Mr. Speaker, in particular, I wish to commend the new general offence for false or misleading statements based on Section 377 of the Companies Act, plus new specific requirements for market operators of domestic financial product markets and amendments that extend the current bans on persons banned from operating in financial markets. Mr. Speaker, the Select Committee has done what it can to put even more spine in this legislation, but this work is not finished, sir. Vigilance is required, and as we speak, sir, one of the factors that led to the credit bubble of the last 5 years has already started again. In the face of inadequate 20th century monetary policy, as we're hearing from the manufacturing inquiry, we have a property roller coaster that once again is rolling down the tracks, or we might say for now, rolling up the tracks. And how convenient that might seem for a government that's worried about opinion polls for Middle New Zealand, until it reaches the top of the track and starts screaming down the other side. Because one thing is for sure, those who don't learn the lessons of history repeat them. And if there's one lesson of financial markets, it's what goes up must come down. What goes up must come down. And the property market is no exception. So, Mr. Speaker, we commend this bill. It is good as far as it goes, all 500 pages of it. But, Mr. Speaker, vigilance is required because it is in the interests of everyday New Zealanders to know that their life savings will be safe and secure and subject to laws that guarantee that the criminal and negligent behaviour of fly-by-night financiers will be caught, will be prosecuted, that they will be sent to jail, Mr. Speaker, and that does not come but too soon for the New Zealanders that have fallen afoul of those lessons of history. Thank you, sir.
I call the honourable member, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.